Hi everyone, it's Maria from My Earth Friendly Kitchen, coming to you today to make some 3-bean chili. This is another one of my what I call pantry meals. It's a dish that has a lot of canned vegetables and beans that you could use. We're going to show you how in just a little bit, but we add a couple of extra veggies to just increase the nutritional density of the value, and you can really use whatever vegetables you want in this. I'm today going to be using some zucchini and yellow squash from my garden because I just picked these and they're super fresh and I'm excited to use them. But we're going to go ahead and get started. So the first things, I have 2 bowls here. One is because I'm going to be sweating a couple of these vegetables when I first start cooking. And so sweating is just, you know, bringing out the essence. And when you have things like garlic and onions and peppers, you really want to kind of sweat them initially, because you know it kind of really helps bring out their flavor. And because this doesn't take very long to cook, because everything is pretty much ready made, you don't want to have them sitting in your pot raw, and then you know nobody, I mean, I don't know, I do because I'm Italian, but nobody really likes a big chunk of garlic when they eat their soups and chilies. So we're just going to chop up the garlic and the onions, and I'm putting my stuff here in my discard bag, which is what I use to make vegetable broth in the future when this bag is pretty full. It's actually already almost full. I feel like I just filled this up, but I've been doing a lot of cooking lately from home as usual. And so I'm just putting this stuff, you know, I do the discard. So just really want to do like a nice rough chop on the garlic. We're going to do the same thing with the onions and the peppers. Now I did about 5 cloves of garlic. You don't have to do as much as me. Like I said, I do love garlic. So does my husband. Thank goodness. He's also mostly Italian, so we share that love for garlic. And then I'm taking 1 like smallish to medium onion, I guess you would call this. If you have a large onion, I would just do half of that, because it's you don't want to put a ton of onions in here. So this one's pretty small. Like I said, that's if you have a big one, then just cut it in half and just use half and save the rest for another meal, which is always food cost friendly by doing that. It just helps make the dice a little bit smaller. So, and then I run my knife here on the edge and then run it through. So this just kind of automatically chops your onions up pretty small, and it saves you just this little tiny butt that goes into my discard bag for future use. And when you leave the hairy end on the back, I learned from watching a cooking show myself that it actually prevents you from wanting to cry when you're cutting up onions. Now, sometimes I still do. I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like all the tricks in the world aren't going to keep me from crying when I cut onions. But this one does pretty well, especially if I'm making like something with a lot of onions, like an onion soup or something. I almost always cry. But that's a little hack that you can try. And then I'm also taking 2 jalapeños. Now I'm not putting this in my discard bag. This goes in the composter because we don't normally put jalapeños in soups. If I'm going to be using it like I am today for soup, I will put that in extra, separate, because I use my vegetable broth for a wide variety of things, and not everything calls for jalapeños. So that's going in the composter. If you don't have a composter, that's okay. You could just toss it out. Vegetables do compost on their own. You could always throw it out into your yard or into, something. It doesn't necessarily have to go into the trash, but if that's all you have, that's okay too. Just throw it in the trash if you don't want to use it. I do take out most of the seeds. I mean, we want this to be spicy, but my daughter, who is 2, loves beans.
I love beans.
So she loves this chili, and I try not to make it too spicy for her. But if you are not worried about that and you want to add all the seeds you want, please go forward. But that's where the heat is kept a lot in jalapeños and most peppers actually. That's where the heat is. So some seeds naturally get in because you're not going to be able to remove them all, so it does add that heat. So I just like to run it and cut them into sticks, and then I run it sideways the other way and cut it into little dices, just like my onions. And you want to try to be as uniform as you can when chopping vegetables in general, especially if you're making something like this, which is what's like I call a one-pot meal, because then you know everything's going to cook fairly evenly. You know, like you want these jalapeños to be super soft. You want the onions to be soft. You want your garlic to be soft. So see how this vegetable, so it's kind of like, this pepper is kind of weird shaped. We call this an ugly vegetable. We like to pick the ugly vegetables in the food grocery store because they tend to be the ones that unfortunately go to waste most of the time. So ugly vegetables are misshapen or bruised or dented or something like that. And, you know, we like to save those guys from the garbage and use them because they taste just the same. They still have the same flavor. I mean, obviously, if they're not good, you know, some things have already unfortunately gone to rot, you know, in the stores. And so that I understand, but a perfectly delicious pepper, just because it looks a little funny, is still just as delicious. I feel like there's a life lesson in there somewhere for us all. So just chop this up again, cutting it into sticks. And then this one I'm cutting just a little bit bigger than the jalapeños because this, I actually want like the real crunch of these peppers to kind of come through. So they're going to be a little bit bigger of a dice in the chili. You know, you want to add some texture since it is an all bean chili. You know, you want to have a little bit of texture in there because you don't want it to be all mush. Now today, like I said, I am adding zucchini and squash, mostly because this is what I just picked from my garden. But this is a great place to add vegetables, to hide them for your kids if they're not big veggie eaters. You know, you can just say, oh, it's chili, you know, and then they're like, woohoo, and they don't even notice the vegetables. I don't know, some kids probably still will if they're really picky, but they're just really, it's a nice way to add it in, you know, because it doesn't take a lot and it's not just a big slice of zucchini on your plate, you know. So I'm just trying to chop these into little, again, everything just comes down to slices and dices, I guess. Slices and dices. You make sticks and squares. And that's the easiest way. Again, you want to try to make things pretty uniform because they're going to break down. And you want to make them break down around the same time. Now, obviously, be careful when you're chopping your vegetables. I do this a lot, so I go pretty quickly, but take your time. You don't want to cut your fingers, you know, by any means, and make sure you always tuck your fingers in when you're chopping your vegetables. Now, I'm actually going to put these in a separate bowl because zucchini and squash don't need to sweat. They will break down naturally. They actually have a pretty high water content for them, so you know they will break down rather quickly. So they go in kind of towards the end when everything else goes in, because they don't need to cook very long. Otherwise, they'll get really, really mushy. And that's okay. Some mush is good because it is chili, right? It is a thick soup, or kind of like a stew. So it's not so bad, you know, if they overcook or if you leave it on the stove too long. You could even throw this in a slow cooker. You know, put it in a pot if you have a slow cooker. Throw it in there and then just set it and forget it for a couple of hours on a low setting. It's okay. That'll work too. Cutting off. Oh yeah, this bag is full. Time for more broth. Whoa, running away. Now this yellow squash seemed to get away from me. I swear I checked it. I don't know if you have any gardeners out there, but I checked it and I said, oh, those will be ready to pick in about 2 days. And then 2 days later, I went out and they had basically tripled in size. I couldn't believe it. Now, the reason I say that is because the core actually develops quite a bit of seeds when you get these really big zucchinis like that. So I'm actually just going to save those for my broth because I don't want a lot of seeds in my chili when it breaks down. This one actually just has a little bit in the middle. But yeah, I couldn't believe it. It went from being, you know, a third of the size. All of a sudden, I was like, whoa, pick those now. Some people like to let them get really big like that because that's how they actually harvest new seeds when they replant their garden. But I haven't gotten to that point yet. We just kind of moved. Oh, this one has a lot of seeds too. We just moved to a new house, so my garden I'm kind of starting from scratch again, which is kind of like lovely, you know. I really love seeing the beginnings of things, especially in a new place. So this is the last bit of zucchini here, yellow squash. They're both considered squash, you know, green zucchini and yellow squash. They're just different in the squash family. So, but they both considered summer squash. And it is summer right now. Anyway. Maybe when you're watching this, it's not summer, but. And then the last thing I always do is get my spices together before I go to the pot. I know it sounds weird. Sometimes I'll do it over the pot, but because this is a large pot of chili, I actually like to have everything together and then I just throw it in at once. So first thing we need, chili powder. This is going to be your main spice, obviously. It is called chili. So whoop, a little more than a tablespoon there. We'll put 2 what we call heaping tablespoons. So heaping is when it like rises above the line. And then we're going to do a tablespoon of cumin. Okay, that gives it a really nice smoky flavor. We're going to do a teaspoon of smoked paprika. Just add to that smoke. A teaspoon of garlic powder. A teaspoon of onion powder. And then a half a teaspoon, I'm just going to use the same one, of ground coriander. So ground coriander is actually cilantro seed. I didn't have my cilantro in my garden. I thought I had a bunch and it's not doing so well. I'm kind of sad about it. But I did have coriander, so I said let me just throw it in because things are flexible, right? We're flexible people. And then about a teaspoon of salt. Again, I use the coarse kosher salt. If you're using more refined salt, you want to use a little bit less and then add when you taste it, just because that can be very salty if you put too much of that in at once. So I have my veggies diced. I've got my spices ready. I'm going to go over to the pot and I'm going to show you the rest and we're going to put it all together. Okay. So we have here now our veggies from our dice, our spices over here. I've opened up some cans of beans and diced tomatoes and corn already because you guys don't need to see me struggling with cans. Opening them up. Not that I struggle that much, but we're going to put about 2 tablespoons or so of olive oil in the bottom of the pot. Turn it on to like a medium to high heat. And we're going to throw all of our peppers, onions, and garlic in first. And we're just going to get this ready. All the small bits of garlic. Give it a little stir so that everything's kind of coated. And the onions kind of break up into their small pieces. And we're just going to let this sweat down, like I said, for about 3 to 5 minutes. Now, I'm actually using some of that veggie broth that I talked about that I make from my discard bag. This is about 4 cups. It's a quart of liquid. So that's what the recipe, that's how it calls for. And then most of the times I'll drain a lot of the cans Especially when I do something with beans or something and I'm making like a bean salad, I'll drain and rinse the cans. I'm actually not going to rinse or drain the beans this time because in the liquid, in the cans for the beans, you actually have all that really amazing starch that's been, kind of leached from the beans as it cooked. So all of that liquid, you really want to keep it because that starchiness is going to help thicken up your chili as it cooks down. The corn I did drain and rinse already, and then the diced tomatoes I did not drain. I left those just in their natural tomato liquid. It's going to add to the flavorfulness of the chili. Now, once this is going, it just smells so fragrant. I love the smell of garlic and onions cooking, and then you add peppers to it. It's just really so good. I usually have like a little spoon rest here, and sometimes if I have an empty can, I put it in a can. It's something my grandmother used to do when she cooked when I was younger. One of those old memories that you have that you don't realize you remember until you remember it, right? This is a wonderful, like, a one pot meal, and this is a really inexpensive meal as well. This meal should really only cost, because this meal will make at least 8 servings for people, so you can have leftovers. You don't have to make such a big pot if you don't want to, but in the 8 servings, as it is, should cost you about $1.50 a serving. So it's super low cost. These can, I'm sure I don't have a particular brand. I'm not trying to like, brand anybody. I used a lot of store brands usually because they're usually the cheapest, or they're on sale. They do the can sales at your grocery stores. I don't know. I think every grocery store does a can sale where you can get like 10 cans for $10, $1 a can, which is great. So I always stock up for that kind of stuff. But otherwise, like I said, it should cost you about $1.50 per serving with the included added vegetables that you get that are fresh. Just really adds that nutritional impact to your dish and just really helps boost it. This is technically considered a high calorie meal, right? And so some people might shy away from it, but the reason why it's so high calorie is because of the beans, because they're super high in carbohydrates, but they are also super high in protein, super high in fiber, magnesium, vital nutrients like folic acid and vitamin A, and it's just really like impactful in nutrition. So I think that the caloric density matches the nutritional density. That means, this is my nurse practitioner brain coming on now, if you have a high calorie count that's low nutritional density, for instance, like a cake or a cookie, right? That has a high calorie too, but you're not getting the nutritional value that you would get from a meal like this that's going to keep you super full and super satisfied for a long time. So that's my little health tidbit for this meal, as you will. All right, so now this is nice and sweat. You can see that they're really shiny. This is how you kind of know they've turned a little bit translucent, the onions. So these are ready. These are broken down a little bit. I'm going to make a little well here for my broth. The reason why is because it was frozen, and this is just going to melt. This is going to melt down. I'm going to put everything around it because it was in the freezer, because that's what I do with it to save it. And then I'm just going to add all this delicious goodness and try to get that bottom. See that bottom? That's all nutrients. That's all really great bean starch that's going to help thicken up this chili here. We're going to add red kidney beans, pinto beans, and black beans to this chili. And that's the 3-bean chili. Now you could add meat to this if you wanted to. If you're not, this is a nice vegetarian meal. Or actually, it's It's vegan. There's nothing so far. If you add cheese and sour cream and stuff to chili, as some people do, then it's not vegan anymore. It would be vegetarian. But you could add meat to this. You could, ground some ground beef, throw it in there as well. Just add to, you could actually, while you're sweating your vegetables, you could cook the beef at the same time and really just cook all that together and then add the beans, if you wanted to. But we eat a lot of vegetarian, or not vegetarian, but we eat a lot of plant-based meals because we like them. And it's better for the environment. So we try to eat when we can. And then we're going to add the corn. Okay, so that's a big can of corn, diced tomatoes. And then we're going to add our zucchini. So see, this is already getting swallowed up here. Now this seems like a big thing here, but it is going to be, this is just because this is taking up space right now. Once that is not frozen anymore, the liquid won't be so high. Well, actually the liquid will be more, but it won't be dispersed so much because, I don't know, my husband could tell you about that. He's big on the, matter and how it dispenses, pushes things out of place. And then I'm just going to add all my spices in here. And then I'm going to let this cook. I'm not going to taste it right away. I've done this recipe a ton, something I'm very used to, so I know this is probably all it needs. But every now and then, depending on the broth actually, because every broth is a little bit different, even the ones you buy in the store, and even the ones I make at home. Sometimes I put more salt or more thyme or more pepper or whatever I put in the base of the broth. So every now and then I just need to tweak it a little bit. So I'm going to let this cook down. I'm going to leave it on the medium to high heat for now. And then I'm just going to check on it probably in about 10 to 15 minutes. I'm going to cover it, check on it, and see it's probably going to be that frozen liquid's going to be now not frozen anymore. And I want it to kind of come up to a little bit of a boil. And then I'm going to turn it down and let it simmer for about 45 minutes. So come back and check in with me in just a few. Okay, so it has been about 10 to 15 minutes or so. We're just going to check the soup. So you see how it doesn't like raise the level if you put it in frozen? Just, time saver, right? I mean, why not? So this looks really good. Everything is marrying. And remember, these are going to break down and it's going to thicken up just a little bit. But I'm just going to taste it right now to see if it needs anything while it's cooking. It actually tastes perfect already. And it's only going to get better as everything really marries and the zucchini and the peppers just really infuse the broth with their flavor. So we're going to let this sit. I'm turning down the heat a little bit between low and medium now. We're going to let this be on cover or covered up for about 45 minutes and then it should be done. So we'll come back and get it ready then. Thanks. So it has been about 45 minutes or so, maybe a little bit more because Lord knows what I was doing. This chili smells amazing in here. You can see it's a little bit thicker, a little bit deeper, richer in color. I am going to taste this one more time in the pot just because if I want to add something for everyone else. Nope, still delicious. So like I said, this just becomes this really nice, beautiful, hearty soup chili. It's like the best. See that steam? And you can sprinkle cheese on here. You can do avocados, sour cream, however you want to do it. But it's just everything's really broken down nicely. You can see the squash is really like translucent now as well. Just get a nice big bite. So good, so hearty, so nutritionally dense. Again, you can make 8 servings out of this. It's plenty of like a one-pot meal. Prep it for the week. You're done for weeks, weeknights that you're busy and you just need something to have on the go. So I hope you enjoy making this recipe with me, and I'll join me later for another food-friendly tips on my channel. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks a lot. Bye.